620 CKRM.
And good afternoon, Saskatchewan. Doing all the work on this edition of the Sports Cage, as always, is Colson Schultz, and doing all the talking will be me, Brendan McGuire, and the Professor, Don Hewitt. Coming up on today's edition of the show, we will go to Winnipeg, where the Jets, don't look now, they might get into the postseason after all, though they have a lot of teams log-jammed with them. I'm not so sure how much I like their chances. I was watching very closely over the weekend and haven't been watching all year. I kind of gave up on them a while ago. Arash Madani, and the Ottawa Senators, too. A lot of ramifications there. It could be 4 Canadian teams getting in. Arash Madani, we'll talk with him about the Blue Jays. Boy, things are just going from bad to worse for the Jays after getting swept by the lowly White Sox. Not looking good against the Dodgers either. We will have our Sports Cage clutch performer, Glen Suitor, will join us, as he does every Tuesday. And PumpJacks Trivia. We will also have Sprinkle of the Day. All that and so much more coming up on this edition of the Sports Cage. I think it's a little more exciting when we have some Canadian teams get involved at the end. I'd kind of given up. I thought it'd just be Montreal and Edmonton. And I don't usually get into the whole Canadian team thing, but I feel like with the political climate of the world, I've kind of dove back into that.
I'm way more into the Canadian NHL team thing than I used to be. Hugely. As a matter of fact, I think if the Maple Leafs were in the Stanley Cup final, I might actually cheer for them because I want Canada to win the Stanley Cup so badly. Speaking of Canadian teams, though, I saw when I arrived at the studio mere minutes ago your Winnipeg Jets old school jersey. If you could just move back for the camera there, Brendan. Now, that is the exact jersey that the Winnipeg Jets should be wearing today. Not only the logo, but also that color blue. What is disgusting about what teams have done that used to wear such a nice blue uniform, what's disgusting is they've all darkened it down because they think you look bigger and tougher. Even the Pats, many years ago,
that's true,
the Pats had a really beautiful colored blue dark jersey. In some respects similar to the one you're wearing now. It was close to that. They've darkened it down like everybody else. The Jets have darkened it down. Who hasn't darkened it down? The Maple Leafs haven't.
The Buffalo Sabres did, then they came back. They undarkened it again.
Okay, that's right. So, not only are you throwing tradition out the window, you don't have as nice a looking uniform. And I'm all for tradition. I do not like, and I've never liked, the new uniform of the Winnipeg Jets when they came back to the NHL a second time. I think that uniform absolutely sucks. And that uniform that our own Brendan McGuire is wearing right now, as well as an old school CKRM logoed hat, which is nice. That should be what the Jets are wearing. I'm telling you right now.
You don't prefer what they had in the 80s or even the because this is 90s. Like this is Teemu Selanne era.
Oh, I thought that was the 80s.
This is the night. This one's pretty sweet too. Well, it's a little different. I'll show you a little later. But the best one might have even been the 70s when they had like Bobby Hull and all of them. Jets 1.0. Of course, their
was a bit different. Yeah.
Yeah, their glamorous era wasn't even in the NHL. Their glamorous era was in that WHA team. Probably could have whipped the Jets 1.0 and maybe Jets 2.0, but that's a whole other discussion. In moments, we will be joining the voice of the Saskatoon Blades, Les Lazaruk, who probably had, I don't want to say the call of his life. He's had a lot of great calls over the years. But
what a call he had.
What a finish. Night. Rowan Calvert and getting the game winner for the Saskatoon Blades to upset the Edmonton Oil Kings.
Moose Jaw Sask, Rowan Calvert.
There you go. And while we get Les on the line, I was going to say he's probably had a lot of big game sevens and other big game calls that he's done over the years. And we've got a photo of him. There was actually something that Les was doing in a previous life other than calling games for the Saskatoon Blades, if you can believe that.
I didn't know he's ever done anything other than.
You're going to find out. But I was going to say, I was going to point out though that there aren't too many. Like we're in Regina, and there aren't too many Blade fans around here. I don't think, although there's a lot of people who have moved down here and whatnot. But I feel like if nothing else, a lot of us will cheer for the Blades or the Raiders in the next round for no other reason than those filthy buggers in Alberta have taken so much from us in the last 50 years.
Absolutely.
We don't want them to have this either.
It's the same thing as cheering for the Canadian teams in the NHL. if there's one lone team left from Saskatchewan in the Western Hockey League playoffs, I'm cheering for them.
Well,
there's no doubt. I'm sure most people are.
You think about it for the Blades. I don't think they got ripped off or anything, but how could you not have your heart broken for them when they lost that 7-game series to Moose Jaw?
Oh, that was
2 years ago, and they're a good organization.
As great a victory that was for Moose Jaw. It was just,
and I'm a big Warriors
maybe even
fan.
a greater loss for Saskatoon. Plus, they hit the goalpost, I think, 3 times in that Game 7 at Moose Jaw.
That's the greatest series. I've said forever that the greatest 7-game series I ever watched was the Canucks and the Flames, round 1, 94, when the Canucks were down 3-1 and they battled back, and Kirk McLean stoned Robert Reichel, and then at the other end, Bure deked Mike Vernon out of his shorts, and that was the last moment that Vernon played with the Calgary in his first go-around. This series, I think, topped it.
Well, probably the greatest series I've ever seen, honestly, was the Moose Jaw Saskatoon one in hockey 2 years ago.
That's what I'm talking about, yeah.
Yeah, but the one I love in the NHL, Brendan, I don't know where you were in 1971.
Not watching hockey.
When the Habs came back and beat Boston in 1971. It was unbelievable. That was when Ken Dryden stood on his head, and they were down. What was the score after the second period? 5-2 for Boston, and Montreal came back and won. I think that's what it was.
It was Game 7?
Game 7, yeah. Crazy.
Montreal beat Boston. Do we have less yet? Okay. We will very pleased to be joined by the voice of the Saskatoon Blades for the past, I'm going to say 32 years, if I'm not wrong. Les Lazaruk. Les, so good of you to join us. I heard you got in really late this morning. I was going to ask you, have you ever had that experience where people say to you the next day, Les, I fell asleep and you were on the radio doing hockey, and then I woke up this morning and you were on the radio again?
Yeah, usually that's my wife that tells me that.
They didn't make you go do the morning show when you got off the bus this morning, did they?
No. I haven't done the morning show in years around here, so I'm quite thankful for that, because yes, it would have been basically, and when we're driving separately, there's 4 of us that are driving separately in a Blades or Saskatoon Entertainment Group vehicle from the team bus. It allows us to have a little more room, a little more comfort than on the bus, which I really like. And I'm able to get my work done pretty readily. And then you're also moving a lot faster than the bus can. So we actually got back probably about a half an hour sooner than what they did. And as a result, it was 4 o'clock in the morning, though, when we got back from Edmonton. And I would say that, I would probably have to have come straight here if I was working morning show, but I don't have to do that. I didn't come in until 10 o'clock this morning, so I actually got a little bit of sleep, but I'm desperately in need of a nap, let me tell you that.
Well, I mean, that was history in so many ways. Tell me if I'm right or wrong here, Les. That was the first Game 7 victory on the road in Blades history. Is that correct?
Very true. Absolutely, Don. That is exactly what it was. Run through the history books and look. The Blades going into yesterday were 0-9-2. There were actually ties back in the late 60s in the Western Hockey League, but 0-9-2 in 11 games, Game 7s on the road. And last night, 3-2 overtime win was the first time the Blades in their franchise history had ever won a Game 7 on the road. They also, for the first time in 3 tries, not nearly as many, scored an overtime winning goal in overtime in Game 7.
Okay. Cool.
So that was something that they did as well last night. And it's also the first time they've beaten the Edmonton Oil Kings in a playoff series. Now, they hadn't played the Oil Kings since the original iteration of the Oil Kings back in the late 60s. The late 60s and 70s. But it's the first time they'd lost 3 series to the Oil Kings of that era back in 68, 69, and 71. So 55 years later, they finally win a series against the Edmonton Oil Kings. And the really strange thing about the series is home ice advantage wasn't. The road team won 5 of the 7 games, and all of the results were alternating. The Blades won all the odd-numbered games, and the Oil Kings won all the even-numbered games, and it worked out in Saskatoon's favor.
Well, and they lose in overtime at home in Game 6. I thought your goose was cooked, didn't you, Brendan? Like, you lose at home, it's 3-3, Edmonton wins in overtime.
You give up that chance, and
I thought, that's it for Saskatoon. But no, talking about character, that this team had under Coach Dan Da Silva. I thought this was a absolutely masterful coaching job by Dan Da Silva.
I don't disagree with you on that, Don. Absolutely. He's been taking a lot of heat around here online. And of course, you can say what you will about keyboard warriors. God bless them. They're out there and they have their rights to their opinions, but they really don't have a clue a lot of times.
No.
And as a result, you end up with people reading stuff like that and they think that it's actually true when it's not. The players love Dan Da Silva, and they would go through the proverbial brick wall for him, and they essentially did that in this series. I mean, this was the 3 seed against the 6 seed. The Oil Kings were 20 points better than the Blades during the regular season. They finished the regular season, did Saskatoon, with back-to-back 4-0 losses, home and home to the Prince Albert Raiders, and everybody looked at it and said, well, there's no way they're going to win that series. And count me among them. I didn't think they had much of a chance. I thought, win a couple of games, get to 6, and I think you're doing well. You'll have proven that you're definitely capable of winning some games against good teams. But they went ahead and exceeded everybody's expectations, mine included, and here they are in round 2 all of a sudden.
You've had a lot of big calls in Game 7s and otherwise. I remember watching the Moose Jaw Saskatoon series. What a great series that was. A couple of years ago. Again, I was just saying off air before you came on, I always said the first round between the Canucks and Flames in '94 was the greatest 7-game series I ever saw until I watched that one. But maybe I'm putting you on the spot, but have you had a chance to think of where it ranks for you for top calls ever, that Game 7 overtime winner by Rowan Calvert?
It's up there. It's probably in the top 5. Actually, it was brought up to me earlier today as to where it is, and I would say it's in the top 5. Certainly the games, those series against Moose Jaw, coming back from 3-0 down the reverse sweep and winning in Game 7 against Red Deer in 2023 in the second round, falling behind 2-0 to Bedard and the Pats, and eventually winning Game 7 at home in the first round in 2023 was an exceptional series. The goal, the dramatics of that goal, now eclipses one that I called in 2002 at the old Winnipeg Arena when Justin Kelly came out of the penalty box and went in on a breakaway and scored, and the Blades beat the Wheat Kings to tie up that series 2-2. That was an opening round series in 2002. And the crazy thing is that I ran into Justin Kelly in Edmonton during the course of this series. He lives in Kelowna and does a lot of personal training with hockey players from the area, and also does a lot with actually German players. So Blades have got 3 of those. So he was visiting in Edmonton to see some of the Oil Kings and some of the Blades that he works with during the off season, and just to see how they're progressing. So it was cool to run into Justin Kelly, who's now in his late 30s, early 40s, I guess, and really neat to come up against, meet up with former players like that and see where they're at. But he, again, had one of the great moments that I'd called was the goal in the barn that I grew up in the old Winnipeg Arena, scoring a goal, the game-winning goal in overtime, double overtime as it was, against Brandon.
I was going to college in Saskatoon that year, and I remember that series. I think the Blades lost in 7, but it was still a great series, and I remember just being glued to it the whole time. That was the only few months I lived up there, and that was my taste of Blades playoff hockey. In the last series, I talked a lot with the Pats in their first-round series. As you know, they lost in 5 games to a really good Medicine Hat team that might be as good as the Prince Albert team that your Blades are about to face. And even when they lost 8-2, I'd listened to it on the radio, so I didn't have the greatest, I didn't see it with my own eyes. I prefer listening on radio. I'm old school that way. But at the same time, a lot of the commentators who were at the games, people who were there, said it's not that they so much got outclassed, it's that you have to play a perfect game and hope that they don't. It's, to use a CFL analogy, I know you're a CFL fan, the only way you could beat Doug Flutie when he came to town was you'd have to play a perfect game and hope that you caught him on an off day. Is that the biggest challenge for the Blades going into a series with Prince Albert? Just sometimes that thought that creeps in, that doubt that we could outwork them by 30% and still lose. Yeah,
I think that kind of enters into it. There were 8 games in the regular season between the two. Prince Albert won 6 of them. The one game that the Blades did win that was very impressive was right in Prince Albert, and they blanked the Raiders 4-0 back in late January. And I think that that's the kind of a game you look back at and say, see, you can do it. You have that ability. The other game they won against the Raiders was way back in opening weekend here at SaskTel Center, and they won in overtime. So, that one's a little less mindful and less applicable, I think, because the game that they won 4-0 in PA, the rosters are basically the same now. That's after the trade deadline. Everything's been done. Everybody's got their teams loaded up, etc. That game for the Blades is one that they can look back at and say, okay, what do we do there? And can we transfer that over and try and utilize it in this upcoming best of 7 against PA?
Well, it seems like this is a different Saskatoon team now after beating Edmonton. Going into Prince Albert, losing 6 of 8, but it's a different team. I mean, just what they did against Edmonton, the belief they had in each other, like you said, 20 points behind, 95 points to 75. I talked to some people in the Western Hockey League that know a lot more about the league than I do, and they said, don't just think it's Prince Albert and Medicine Hat going for this. Edmonton is too. They're going to be right in there for the Memorial Cup. You guys just knocked out a team that some people thought could actually win the Western Hockey League. So you've got to think it's a different squad going into PA on Friday, do you not?
It's a different squad even from that last weekend of the regular season where the Blades lost back-to-back home and home with the Raiders, back-to-back 4-0 losses. And you go into the playoffs off of that and you think to yourself, they don't have a hope against Edmonton. They're going to be out in 4 or 5. And no, they turn around and they play like they did in the game before that weekend. That home and home weekend to finish the regular season, they played on the Wednesday night at home and beat Brandon, a pretty good Brandon team, 6-2. And the way they played that night was the way they played 7 straight games against the Edmonton Oil Kings. The nice thing is that they played the same type of game for 7 straight games. During the course of the regular season, they'd play 3 or 4 really good games like that, and they take 3 or 4 off, not play that way, and not reach the level and be consistently inconsistent, as we like to say. But they had 7 really good games in a row against the Edmonton Oil Kings, and they are full measure for being in the second round of the playoffs. Is it going to be good enough against the Prince Albert Raiders? That remains to be seen, because I think PA is a half a step better than what the Edmonton Oil Kings were and will be, I'm sure, for the Blades to come up against.
So Saskatoon Blades broadcaster Les Lazaruk is our guest on the SportsCage at 620 CKRM. Colson came up with something I thought was kind of interesting looking around on the social media. I try to stay off that garbage, but Colson's a little more brave than I am.
Well, I have to do it for my job.
And so. I thought this would be a great question for you to ask to Les. Go ahead.
Yeah, so there was an individual who does play-by-play at a university in the States who retweeted the call of the OT winner from the game you were calling. It wasn't your call, it was Edmonton's call. And they said, the gist of the tweet was, young broadcasters take note, even if you're the home team, you should still get excited for a game winner. And then the exact words he used was, this is a crime against this sport. I thought the call was pretty professional, pretty even keel. He gave some information afterwards, right? Like a pretty clean. And so a lot of people in the comments were like, that's too strong a language. So as someone who, you mentioned how many times the Blades have been close. And I know you didn't call all of them, but as someone who's been there, what would you say as a home broadcaster who has to face calling a losing goal?
Yeah, it's not easy. You try and make it so that it sounds like there's going to be, some excitement out of it, but really your disappointment kind of takes over. You are still the broadcaster for that team. And I don't know of any broadcaster in our league who would give it the full home team victory type of hoop and holler as you would for when your team scored the big goal like that. Matt Barrett is the guy he's talking about. He's my colleague in Edmonton. We just spent tremendous 12 days together, him and I, chatting back and forth. So Matt's a professional. He does a heck of a job on behalf of the Edmonton Oil Kings. And his call, I thought, was just fine for what he was faced with. I mean, this is a team that got to 7 games last year, lost out to the Prince Albert Raiders in the opening round. In fact, the Oil Kings last year had a 3-1 series lead and lost games 5, 6, and 7. And now here they are being taken to the limit by the Saskatoon Blades. And so, yeah, there's going to be disappointment when Rowan Calvert's deflection finds its way into the net. And for a second straight year, the Oil Kings, a very good team, are on the sidelines all of a sudden after one round. So I think Matt Barrett did an outstanding job on everything. And I thank him for all the help he provided me with regards to during the series when it came to helping out with the Edmonton Oil Kings and my role that I had to try and do in order to make them and the Blades sound as good as we could possibly make them.
Here's something that I think is unique about this upset, because it was an upset.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
My theory is you don't get as many upsets in the Western Hockey League, for example, as you do in the National Hockey League. And that's why I think this is so unique. And the reason I would argue that, and maybe it's changing a bit with some time, but because players in the, say, the WHL, for an example, they go all out all the time. NHL players don't. And therefore, when somebody's just going to turn it on in the playoffs like they can in the NHL, you might get some more upsets because suddenly this team is turning it on that maybe didn't play as well as they should have. But in the Western Hockey League, you don't get as much of that because everybody's going full bore all year. Does that make any sense?
I think I see where you're coming from. A lot of pros. I'm a big believer that there are a lot of pros who play in the NHL for 10, 15 years. If you're lucky, that's a long career. And for some of them, go through that kind of donut in the middle where it's more about the contract and other things. Whereas I do believe there's something to what you're saying in the Western League. You've only got like a 4-year window, 3-year window, and
they're hungry.
Yes, they're hungry. That's right, and they're trying to earn. Whereas a lot of NHL players have already earned a lot of that extra stuff. Colson, you had something that you wanted to add?
Yeah, there was just one more thing here. We had a text in from Sean and McLean. Just wanted to say what a pleasure it is to be listening to Les Lazaruk, one of the best in the business.
There you go. And by the way, Les used to do something other than broadcast for the Saskatoon Blades, and we'll bring that up here. But for a while, you were one of the key parts of probably I don't want to say better than what CKRM has, but 1 and 1A for CFL broadcast teams. And for those listening on radio, we've got a photo of Les. Used to be part of the Winnipeg Blue Bomber broadcast crew with Bob Irving, and some of those faces look familiar. I don't know. I think the one guy's Scott Taylor.
Can you see that, Les? Can you see that video?
Yeah, I can see it. I can see it.
Folks? Who is
okay, now that's actually the Jets. We also did the pre and post game from Chi-Chi's with the Winnipeg Jets. Okay. And that's actually a Jets one. So I'm bottom left. Bob Irving is beside me with the glasses on. The late Ren Davis from the Winnipeg Free Press is at his right as you look at the picture. Between Bob and I is Scott Taylor, longtime sports columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press and still very involved with hockey in Winnipeg today. Ted Irvin, up top left, former National Hockey Leaguer. And then Bob Holliday is the other fellow there. Bob is passed, unfortunately, just a great guy. He was a jack of all trades, seemed to know everybody in the world, and was just an invaluable part of our team at CJOB in Winnipeg back in the 1980s.
Now, Ted Irvin, he played for the Rangers, did he not?
He played for the Rangers. He also played for the LA Kings. He was actually an original member of the LA Kings when they came into the National Hockey League back in 1967.
Well, he was a rugged individual. I remember when he played for the Rangers, he was giving a whole pile of people problems physically, old Ted.
This is way before my time even. But are you, by the way, we have Brian Munz coming on later this hour. Are you still a Jets fan? Is that your team?
Absolutely, I am. I love the jersey. I'm with Don, though. The right jersey to be wearing, and actually they do wear it from time to time as their third, but it's one that goes back to the WHA days. And again, growing up in Winnipeg, the WHA Jets were the team. That was the big deal. That was before the Edmonton Oilers came along and ruined it for everybody in Winnipeg with Gretzky, etc. I mean, I'm still burned at that. But having said that, though, that Jets jersey was the one. Although that is the one that General Manager Mike Smith kind of came along with. And yes, that was the group with Solani and those types of people. And it became very popular as well with a lot of fans just before the Jets ended up going on to Arizona.
Was there a reason why they didn't go back to their old logo?
I think they wanted to sell more merchandise. I think everybody made that.
Was there a legal reason?
I don't think so. No, they own the likeness, and they have. I think they just wanted everybody in Winnipeg has one of these, so everybody will just wear it. I think that was the idea behind it, but I'm not
different
sure.
Different owners too.
They goofed.
And different owners, right? Yeah. So a little bit of a change.
I think
there.
the current Winnipeg Jets uniform might be the worst in the entire National Hockey League.
Well, you know what?
And the old one was one of the better ones.
I felt that way at first, but the Canadian flag on there, it's kind of grown on me a bit. But I'm with you. I think they should go back to this or what they had in the 80s. Les Lazaruk, thanks for doing this. Congratulations that you get to keep doing playoff hockey for at least a couple more weeks, hopefully longer.
Good luck, Les. The rubber match.
Never know.
Match.
It's going to be a difficult goal.
Your third series with them since 2019. You've both won one each.
Yeah, it's going to be a difficult one, though, because they're very, very good, and I think the Blades will really have it up against them. But we'll see what happens. If they can play like they did against Edmonton, they'll give them a heck of a series.
Well, whoever wins the series, all of Saskatchewan will be pulling for them. So good luck.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. That is Les Lazaruk, the play-by-play voice of the Saskatoon Blades for many years since.
You talk about professionals.
Yeah.
You can go anywhere in professional hockey. They're play-by-play men, and there's lots of good pros. Chris Cuthbert at the top of the list, as far as I'm concerned. But Les is as professional as any hockey play-by-play man you'll see anywhere at any time.
I think he might have worked with Les somehow, but what's his name? Toronto guy. Rob Faulds. When he talks about great junior hockey play-by-play guys, the first name he thinks of is Les. Yeah. And, so he would know. He's a pro working at.
And we got some good callers down here in the Western Hockey League.
Oh, they all come from here. This is where
some good play-by-play men.
The best. This is where we grow the best for hockey play-by-play people.
Exactly.
I better take a time out.
Brendan, yourself.
Gonna.
I had a few years. The Windsor Spitfires
for 1 year. Well, Estevan
and did
Bruins.
A darn good job, Estevan Bruins.
But I had way more fun in Estevan. And I'll tell you why when we come back. Okay. Our next guest is Brian Munz. Will join us from Winnipeg. You are listening to the Sports Cage on 620 CKRM and watching at sportscage.com. You can join in on the discussion. The Prairie Land Rentals and Sales text line at 306-936-6262. Prairie Land Rentals and Sales since 1986 for big or small jobs. Stop in and deal with the owner. 600 Albert Street. Snowblowers, skid steers, power sources, moving equipment. I didn't realize till I was looking at myself on camera when we had Les Lazaruk.
Sounds like myself on camera.
What a terrible...
Are you always looking at yourself on camera? What's going on?
Well, since we brought in all these cameras and these lights, should I be like Bob McCown and put those shades on because it's so bright in here?
Well, you could try it.
I don't know.
You never know.
I don't think it works so good for him either. But I was going to say, what a terrible match this green with the blue is. But we're just going to roll with it.
What is that green T-shirt you have underneath?
U of R Rams.
There you go. The voice of the U of R Rams here on CKRM Radio.
I think they're going to be good this year, too.
Brendan McGuire, who does a great job there. By the way, not that we're talking about the Rams for very long here, but I thought they did a heck of a job going up into Saskatoon without Colin Erickson, their running back, last fall.
You're thinking of Colin. That's his dad, who is the big star.
Oh, that's his dad.
It's Marshall. Colin's son, Marshall.
I'm thinking of his dad. Yes, I'm sorry. In fact, they both were great running backs for the Rams, both Ericksons. But I thought without Marshall Erickson up there, they did a heck of a job. Against the Huskies, who went on to beat Queens and played here in the Vanier Cup. But what are the Rams going to be like next year? I think they're going to be really good if Owen Sieben can stay healthy. But because you have to remember his first year, the rookie year, where he was the Rookie of the Year, they got off to a bad start, and then he took over. And then, new team. He did really, really well. Then the next year he got concussed in the first half of the first game. Yeah. And then last year he had to get his spot back and took some time because that's the other thing. The Rams probably have the best quarterback room of anybody in Canada West because Noah Pelche's won a lot of clutch games. Yeah, and so Sieben will start the year as the starter, but they have the best backup. So that's a good sign. But if Owen can stay healthy, look out. And that's a little surprising to me because I thought the team was going to be really built for 24 and 25, but I think they'll be better in 26, especially with another year of number 35, Marshall Erickson. Yeah. So, anywho, we've been talking about the Winnipeg. I think Marshall can play in the CFL, don't you?
Yeah, well, he can catch the ball too. He's a lot different than Colin in the fact that Colin joked, and so did Frank McChrystal, that he can actually catch the football. Yeah. Colin was more of a smash
was a banger.
He was a banger. Marshall can do that.
Probably a stronger athlete overall than his dad.
He can probably do that too, but he can run outside. He runs outside the tackle box. He's very much built for a CFL field. Totally, which is exciting to see. Our next guest comes to us from the great city of Winnipeg, where the Jets have come back from the dead, and a lot of us had given up on them, 3-4 weeks ago, and now we're talking about them fighting their way into the playoffs. Longtime broadcaster Brian Munz. Had you given up on the Jets in February, early March, like some of us have, or were you keeping the faith the whole way?
Do we have to go Jets right away, or can we get to the important stuff first?
Well, the hat. What's the hat? Explain that. Colson knows what you're talking about. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, as a avid listener and follower for, I don't want to say Barney too much, but the rest of you guys, I saw Les Lazaruk on earlier on sporting the Blades jersey. And as the former voice of the Raiders and the big week that gets underway at the Art Hauser Center on Friday night, had to put the Raider hat on.
That's a Raider hat. Is that like a third jersey? What is that logo? Is that like a third jersey? What is that?
Yeah, that's their third. They brought it in a few years ago now. They had a contest, and I'm not sure who it was, but whoever did hit it out of the park. And in all honesty, and I'll be brutally honest with you, I wish this was their new jersey they wore all the time. They've got a great black third jersey they wear. They could put a white one out, and they would sell that thing out in a heartbeat. Now, I still like the logo they're wearing right now, and I bleed green, obviously, but go Raiders. It's going to be a fun time in round 2.
Is this a rare example, and I would say it's rare, where a third jersey could actually be better than the older traditional one in Prince Albert?
Could be. Now, I don't want to go down the road too far, but I liked the jersey back in 1980 that everybody knows the Raiders wore, the old green and white and gold, but they've obviously moved on from that one. So yeah, they've got such a strong, rich tradition. It was awesome to be in the booth for 5 years, still keep in touch with everybody back in PA, and I've been watching a lot. Actually, I was just texting with Les. I gave him the heads up that I was going to throw him under the bus. I watched games 6 and 7 on Victory TV, and it's so cool to be able to watch the games. It's like you're there. And I remember back when I was calling Raider games in, when was it, 2000 to 05, I guess it was. And we'll all laugh at this now. The internet was just coming on, and really it was all radio, right? Yeah. So you couldn't really stream anything as of yet. Radio was the conduit to everybody. And now that you can watch games and pretty much get an NHL feel of how good the broadcasters are in the Western League, they give you that NHL feel when you're watching online right now. So for a guy that's not in a WHL market anymore, it's fantastic.
Selfishly, I miss that era because I loved calling games because everything went through you. You were the show. You had to paint the picture. You had to do everything. It's a different animal once you bring video in. Different world.
Yeah, it sure is. You obviously call the game so much different. And, being fortunate to do both radio and television, you do have to alter what you do when you're on TV because you're right. You know this from, I heard you guys talking about you're calling Rams games. And again, we're not going to agree here because I was a former voice of the Saskatoon Hilltops too. This whole show's going downhill for you today. But I came in on the wrong day. Don's the only guy I love. I remember watching him when I was growing up in Regina on TV. So you know what? It's been fun to watch the whole really medium evolve though with how great it is for marketing because we would have this conversation all the time when there was no video and games weren't available as easily as they were. Do you broadcast home and road? What do you do because you want people to come into the building and you don't want them to stay away? Well, the best opportunity to promote hockey is to show how great a home game is. And I remember having that conversation tons of times with management. And fortunately enough, everywhere I got a chance to be, we did both home and away. And it was big. And now we see it all the time. And you look at it now, if you weren't broadcasting games on video and having a chance to get the radio call on there, everybody would just shaking their heads wondering what's going on.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, you can watch every single hockey game you can name on Victory or Flow, wherever. Everything is streaming, and that's a good thing. It's not going to change. But It's sort of like the difference between reading a book and then watching the movie that was based on the book you just read. The book is always better because your imagination becomes part of reading that book. And I can remember as a kid growing up listening to old school broadcasters like John Badham calling the Pats, even CBC Radio having NHL games on. And growing up, I'm a little older than you two guys, but my imagination in what I was listening to and the description that the play-by-play man was giving me was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience, and I'm going to agree with you, Brendan. There's something about just listening to a hockey game on radio. There's some magic there that's not quite the same.
I got the same thing with Rob Carney for years. There was even the Pats didn't have a radio contract for years, and I would listen to Rob Carney do Moose Jaw Warrior games, and the team was terrible. And yet I would just find it so interesting, just the way he would paint the picture, because he could do that.
He was very talented.
With a smile on his face. One thing I wanted to ask you about, Brian, I see you're wearing the Humboldt Strong shirt, and as we know, we've just passed the 8th anniversary of that terrible, terrible tragedy. I remember when TSN did the homecoming game, their first game back, and you were the master of ceremonies to that. I just wanted to get a thought or two from you about that. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, did you grow up you did the Bronco games. Are you from Humboldt or Melfort or that area?
Yeah, so I grew up in Regina. I was born in Regina till grade 8. And then my dad got transferred with his work for grade 9, and we moved to Humboldt, and family's been there ever since. So, your formative years, I guess you can kind of say wherever you feel they are. And for me, that was Humboldt. Not to take anything away from Regina, but, that's where some of my best friends today still are. And we all kind of go back. And obviously, Jared Bednar and I started the golf tournament, that August after the bus crash happened. We both wanted to give back to what we call our hometown. So we've been able to do that, and we'll continue that coming up in the middle of August. But yeah, there's no question. Yesterday always seems to be a hard day for everybody involved. I was texting with a few of the families and few other people back at home, and it's not just a one day, I don't think, for anybody in Saskatchewan, and even those that are involved in the hockey world. And you still get it, and you guys would know this even from the Swift Current bus accident. When I was a younger guy growing up in Regina, I had season tickets for the Pats, and I've still got a ticket actually in Humboldt for that Pats Bronco game the day that that their bus crashed and they lost 4 lives involved in that. So, obviously the anniversary is a day that brings a lot of light to it, but I think in all honesty, there's not a week that doesn't go by that at some point you don't think of it, and you remember everybody that passed. And I still keep in touch with a lot of the survivors, and we get a chance to see a lot of them each summer in the golf tournament, which is great for them to come back and see how everybody's doing.
I got a buddy who didn't know anybody on the bus, but he knew somebody of somebody who was on. And when I was broadcasting games in Estevan, I got to know Darcy Hogan really well. We would ride the bus together. Yeah. And so I made the comment to him, this crash has impacted us probably less than anybody, and yet we still know somebody somehow. Like that was that whole situation was such a, I don't know what the word is, microcosm of what Saskatchewan is, one big small town.
Well, it really is. And as we all know, sport brings everybody together, right? Like, you don't have to be a hockey fan, and I remember talking about this because being the job that I was doing at that time as the voice of the Jets and, having a bit of a platform there, I was doing tons of interviews for probably a year after the accident on a weekly basis. And, the conversation was always talking about everybody's been on a bus, right? If you weren't a hockey team, you were a football team, or you were going on a school trip, or you were a dance, or it was a corporate gathering. So it could have been anybody that day that could have been affected going through that intersection. And I think, Brendan, you hit it bang on the head there. We're all small town Sasky guys at heart, and everybody knows somebody that knows somebody else that you're friends with, and that's what's so cool about being a prairie person.
I always thought of the Humboldt crash as 9/11 came to Saskatchewan.
That's what it felt like.
It's
I think that line was thrown around.
It was so utterly devastating.
Yeah.
That
Yeah, no,
It's hard to believe
for
still.
for sure, and I feel like the emotion of it hasn't, and it'll never go away, and I feel like it hasn't really subsided at all, even though it's been 8 years since then, and even just seeing some of the people who had to go through what they had to go through grow up, not just people who were on the bus, but even like I mentioned Darcy Hogan, seeing his wife and kids and everything that they've had to live on in the near decades since. On a little bit lighter note, I wanted to talk about the Winnipeg Jets and their playoff situation. I've always been a Canuck fan, but I've had a soft spot for the Jets and the Montreal Canadiens and total disdain for the Maple Leafs. So I don't really get on the Canadian team bandwagon too much, but recent political events have pushed me that way again. I had given up on the Jets by the end of January. I've always thought, I think I said on this program, they're a great organization if they even if they don't make the playoffs with the way they draft, develop, etc. And now they seem to have come back from the dead. Had you given up on the Jets at one point this season?
Well, I think when you look at the 11 or 12 game losing streak they had at one point, and obviously they lost their all-star goaltender in Connor Hellebuck, it looked like the season was done. And then with the playoff format now and trying to get into those last two wildcard spots, the reality just wasn't there because there was so many teams between them and trying to get into that so-called 7-8 playoff spot. And it's still a big hill to climb. Like, let's be honest. I know as we look at it right now, they're only 3 points out, but the Kings, the Predators, the San Jose Sharks, the St. Louis Blues. I know Winnipeg's now 1 point up on St. Louis going into their game on Thursday in St. Louis. But all of those other teams don't seem to lose either, right? So for the Jets to have success, they've got to run the table or come pretty darn close to it.
Pretty close.
And then when you see the schedule, I mentioned the St. Louis game coming up on Thursday. They've got Philadelphia at home on the weekend. Then they've got a 2-game road trip coming up next week into Vegas and Utah, which are not easy games, especially with the coaching change the Golden Knights just made. And then you wrap it up here, I think it's next Thursday, the San Jose Sharks are in town, and that's one of the teams they're battling. So, you'd like to say they control their own destiny right now. They need to, win at least 4 of those 5 and maybe get some help. But the fun thing about it here in Winnipeg is it's a buzz again. people are excited about the team.
Good.
Terrific atmosphere in the building last night for the Seattle game, and obviously they've scored some goals. They've won a lot here lately, and are playing some pretty good hockey. So it's good for the team that they just didn't fizzle out down the stretch here and make it tough on everybody to watch.
How has the team changed, do you think, Brian, since the Stanley and Shen trade?
Well, I think that youthful enthusiasm, Don, in the bottom 6 has been big. Like, again, I watched a lot of the game last night because Lane Lambert's a good friend of mine from Melfort, coach of the Kraken. So, going back and forth between that, and then I did watch all of the Blade Oil King game last night, so I was flipping between channels. Yeah. But everything that you see, and even talking to people inside the Jets organization, I went down to the rink last week just to see a few guys, and they're excited to have these young guys are in there. And you know what? Luke Shen was the perfect fit for when he needed to come in. He needed to come in, stabilize the blue line a little bit. Obviously, there was question if Logan Stanley was ever going to get the deal to move forward. And obviously, it didn't work out, so they decided to make the trade. So they got 2 really good young players. And I think that's great for the team. And the biggest thing for me, and probably the biggest story going into this year, was the return of Jonathan Toews. Right, you've got the 3-time Stanley Cup champion. You've got the Olympic hero. He's a proud Winnipeg kid, and he wanted to play for the Jets. And they said it openly right away that it wasn't going to be Jonathan Toews of the Blackhawks in the first half of the year because he hadn't played in so long and really wasn't around the game. And now you watch that game last night. The goal he scores, he's right on the doorstep. The power play was going last night. Scott Arniel's put him into that top unit now that's got so much dynamic power with, Scheifele and what Morrissey's been able to do. Kyle Connor's been a great fit in there. So they've kind of found their stride here, and Johnny's been a big part of that. So it's been neat to see that, especially here in the second half of the year, what they wanted to hopefully have from Jonathan Toews has paid off in dividends. Cool. And I think I'm among most Winnipeg people now that really hope that he comes back again next year.
And he said Jets or bust.
Well,
I loved it when Jonathan Toews said, I'm either playing for the Jets or I'm done. I loved that.
Well, you see a lot of these older players, and when they have time off, it's really hard to get back into it. I think of the lockout year that was wiped away in 04-05. And so many players either didn't come back, like Scott Stevens announced his retirement right away, or of the ones who did come back, they were never the same. And I'm thinking of Steve Yzerman. I'm thinking of Jeremy Roenick. And I just think that when you get into your mid to late 30s, you think, okay, it'd be good to have some time off. Sometimes you need time off like Toews did because of illness, injury, or what have you. But it really takes a while to get back into the swing of things. And another good example would be that when the Ducks won the Cup in 07, two guys retired, Scott Niedermayer, and Teemu Selanne. They didn't retire, but they were kind of and then they didn't show up for training camp, and then half the season went by, and Brian Burke got all grumpy about it, whatever. They ended up signing back, but I've heard of a conversation that occurred between Selanne and Niedermayer, which was, let's not do this again, because it takes a while to get back into the swing of things. Like, if we're going to play, let's show up for camp and let's go through everything else. And they kind of made that pact, and I think they both followed that the rest of their career. So the reason I'm taking the long way around to ask the question, if you get Jonathan Toews back in Winnipeg next year, is it possible he'll be a lot better than Jonathan Toews was this year, because he's not coming off such a long layoff anymore?
Yeah, and if I can add chapter 12 to your story there, the biggest part about this year too, that none of us would know from the outside, but having lived the life for a while, but wasn't involved into this year, obviously, is this condensed schedule is absolutely bonkers for everybody involved. Like, you're playing 3-4 games a week. Like, there's been no downtime for anybody except for the short Olympic break. And even that was, condensed a little bit just with how the calendar works, and they have to be done in television and all that kind of deal. So surviving this year for Jonathan Toews has been huge. And then next year, I'll be honest with you, and, I've talked to a lot of people around the league. They're looking forward to next year because you'll have a bit of breathing time again, and you'll get the odd day off on the road, or you'll get an extra day a month at home where you don't have to go to the rink. And they're living the life. They're in 5-star hotels. They're on charter planes. Like, they've got the world exactly where you want to be when you're in the NHL. But it's a challenge to get through this 82-game regular season schedule for sure.
I'm the first guy to criticize a coach here and there. There's just been a couple of coaching changes, of course, in the NHL. I have always liked, since he took the job over, Scott Arniel. I think Scott Arniel is a really good hockey coach and has done a hell of a job. I mean, you're there, Brian. What do you think?
Well, I agree 1,000% with you, Don. And, I've got a soft spot for him, obviously, because when I moved to Winnipeg in 2006 to call Manitoba Moose games, he was the head coach. So we were together for pretty much every day for 4 straight years before he got his first chance to go to Columbus. And then Claude Noel came in to replace Arnie. But I'm a huge fan. And, he's openly admitted that from the first year when he was in Columbus to where he was then going to be an assistant coach, an associate coach, and some other stops around the league, he grew a lot. He made some mistakes like we all do young in our career. And he's been a really good fit for this group of players. He's a really good communicator. And I know that word gets overused a lot, but, he was a good player, and he'll bug me when we're playing golf now this summer if he ever hears that I say he wasn't a superstar. But you think of the stars that were here in Winnipeg, right? Like the Howard Chucks and the Solanys and the Housleys and the Randy Carlyles, and, the list goes on and on. Scott Arniel was a really good hockey player.
He was.
But he understands how it is when you've got the elite of the Mark Scheifele, and then you've got the young guy like a Brad Lambert that's coming in. So having been able to coach all those different players as to how good they are and whatever level they're at, he understands, and he's a proud Winnipeg guy. I know he's originally from Ontario, but, he married a Winnipeg girl. They live here. His family was here all the way through when he went to coach New York and Washington and Columbus and all that kind of deal. So his heart's in Winnipeg, and I'm very happy to see when Scott Arniel wins hockey games because of just the guy he is, let alone the coach.
I think it's cool when they have people coaching who are part of Jets 1.0. That's why I was rooting for Rick Bowness before. Hey, listen, we're up against the clock. This is great. We never have enough time. I can't wait to do this again. And while I'm watching the Blades and Raiders series, I'll be thinking of you. Go Blades.
Go Raiders in 3.
In 3.
And I'm thinking of the Jets, damn it. I'm really cheering for the Jets to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to happen for them or the Senators, but I'd like to see them fight their way in. That is Brian Munz, longtime, well, I was going to say voice of the Winnipeg Jets, but longtime junior hockey broadcaster.
Real pro.
Yeah.
But we've just had 2 super professional guys.
He worked for the
hockey business,
in Melfort.
Business.
In Melfort, they had a super station that did games for 3 SJ teams. I think it was Humboldt, Melfort, Nickel, and you do more games than an NHL broadcaster. So
that's right.
That's how you become the best.
Yes.
And Brian had that role for a while. Okay, time to break. Coming up in hour 2, we will check in with Arash Madani. You are listening to the Sports Cage on 620 CKRM. SJHL playoffs tonight. The Yorkton Terriers are in North Battleford to take on the Battleford Stars. That best of 7 series is tied at 1. You can hear that game on our sister station GX94 starting at 7:15 with the great Benny Walchuk on the pregame show. Flin Flon Bombers visit the Weyburn Red Wings for game 3. That best of 7 series is tied at 1. The first 2 games were in the Flon. Weyburn has stolen home ice advantage.
That looks like a dandy.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that might be.
Dandy start to that one.
I think
everybody in Weyburn and area get to the rink tonight.
Playoffs are as interesting as I remember ever in the SJ this year, getting down to the Final Four. Canadian Masters Curling Championship runs through April 11th in Grand Prairie, Alberta. Saskatchewan is represented by Weyburn's Jim Nicolishin and Yorkton's Kathy Inglis. On their schedules tonight, Nicolishin plays Alberta. That will be an 8 o'clock draw. And in the NHL, Canadian teams in action. The Montreal Canadiens are home to the Florida Panthers. The Calgary Flames just playing out the string visiting the Dallas Stars. Oilers are in Utah. Still feels weird having Utah in the NHL. Vancouver home to Vegas. That should be an easy one. Mike Canuck should be ripe for the picking going against Tortorella. Torts can't wait to get a shot at Vancouver. And, of course, a little bit later today, the Blue Jays and the Dodgers see if they can get back on track.
And we will see the softened Torts because hard-ass coaches don't work anymore. Torts,
you think he's going to change? Yeah, he's softened over the years. We saw that with Mike Keenan.
You have to, or you're out the door.
Yeah, but Mike Keenan, when he softened, he sucked. SportsCage.com poll: should referees call games differently in the playoffs and overtime? That is your sports ticker for Reliance Heath Water Heater Rentals, keeping you in hot and soft water. Call on Reliance. Class is in session with the professor, Don Hewitt, and Colson Schultz and I, Brendan McGuire, are just along for the ride. I got rid of that.
Can I compliment you on your T-shirt?
Well, please do.
It's a nice T-shirt.
I was smothering in that awful Jets jersey. It's a beautiful looking jersey, but I was dying in it.
But I talk about your Rams T-shirt. I like it. It's show the people.
This is like the staff,
nice T-shirt.
The business manager. Mandatel part let me have one of these because I walk in the office and I'm just there waiting to talk to people. Yeah, and I see it on the shelf and I think it's a shirt reserved for volunteers who are helping people. And I said, "Oh, I just love this shirt. How much would it cost me?" And she's like, "Well, it's not really for sale." And I think she sold it to me because I promised her that I wouldn't hang around the concourse and people would think that I was there to help.
No, I
just had to have it.
You got to compliment me too on my T-shirt.
Wiener Wednesday. You're wearing it on the wrong day, though.
The most underrated thing in sports, Wiener Wednesday at Pat Games. Totally underrated.
They're doing
2 for 1 hot dogs. 2 hot dogs for the price of 1, and sometimes they're actually warm.
Did you hear what they're doing for the Blue Jays to celebrate their 50 years? I think it's tonight.
They're going to hit the baseball? No, they won't do that.
No,
Sorry.
They definitely won't do that. They to celebrate their 50 years, because their first year was 1977, hot dogs are 77 cents.
That's cool.
I think that's a good idea.
I love that.
Costco does something like that. Like they haven't raised their price on hot dogs or something.
What? The legendary football coach Don Matthews made a brilliant comment once that I thought was very accurate. And he said, Don said to Don. Don said to Don, "There's one thing that is better than sex." And I was trying to think, well, okay, what?
I'm picturing Don Matthews and sex, but go ahead.
Oh, I could say something there. I will not. Won't shut down the radio station. But he said, one thing that's better than sex, what is it? A good hot dog.
Don must have found some really good.
Right. He
must have found some really good hot dogs, or he was having some really poor sex at that stage of his life. But we'll go to Arash Madani in moments, and but before we do that, we're going to talk a lot of Toronto stuff. You wanted to rip the Raptors?
Well, I want Arash in on this because I know he wants to talk about the Jays probably and how they've got a pop gun offense. But can we get Arash in on this?
1 second.
Colson?
Okay, he's not ready yet.
Okay, so I'm going to.
You want me to delay this Raptor rant until we have? We can do that. But I was going to say.
Get back to your T-shirt then.
Well, I was just going to say I feel like you're a little bit hard on the old Raptors. I remember you had somebody on and you were railing away on Masai Ujiri and a couple of years ago.
He's gone.
And now he's gone. But at the end, he was overpaid. I agree with that. But
he bought some of the Toronto Tempo. He has so much money. He's got ownership in the Toronto Tempo.
Well, that's okay.
And that's exciting. I'm jacked about the Toronto Tempo starting.
You know what? Why don't we just bring Arash in?
It's time to go coast to coast with Arash Madani for Smart Investing Solutions. Be smart with your money. Call Brian Gawley at Smart Investing Solutions, 546-2533.
All right, Arash, we're going to let the professor give you his candid thoughts on the Toronto Raptors before we talk about all this Blue Jays stuff. Mr. Professor, the floor is yours.
And I want Arash in on this. So, Arash, I'm hunkering down to watch the Raptors play in Boston against the Celtics. Now, they don't have their starting point guard. Quickly's out. I understand that. But I knew they were going to lose. That there was no chance in hell that this team that is right at the luxury tax cap in the NBA salary structure, that there's no chance that this team is going to win. For a variety of reasons. Number one, Pirtle is average, but he's getting paid almost like a superstar salary. The amount of money that they just gave him at the end of last year is absurd. He's got a bad back. He's 30 years old, blah, blah. I mean, it just what they're paying him for what he's doing is ridiculous. I'm looking at very good NBA players, strong NBA players like say Barnes and Barrett, but they're not going to beat the Celtics. They don't have the mojo. They don't have whatever you need. I'm going to give Ingram a pass. He's just in his first year. He had a good run in New Orleans in one playoff year. Didn't do too badly at times with the Lakers.
I'll take your word for it. I know nothing about any of this.
But I'm just saying, this is one overpaid basketball team that is now fading to a play-in. They don't have it. Whatever the it factor is, they don't have it. What do you think, Arash?
Well, Don, I agree with almost everything you say. I agree they don't have it. I agree they don't have a number one. They have a bunch of 2s and 3s on the roster and 4s. I agree that they're fading. I agree that they're not going to make much of an impact in the playoffs. Where I push back on is they're actually not overpaid at all. What's happened is they're just getting the going rate for NBA salaries these days. Like the 10th man on an NBA roster makes more than the majority of superstars in the NHL. It's just the economics of their league, the money, the growth, the global appeal, the international broadcast revenue, on it goes.
Oh, Temple makes $3 million a year as a cheerleader on the Raptor bench. Carry on, Arash.
There you go. So it's like the NBA money's insane. And then a lot of it ties into the TV money, and this is where the NFL's in the driver's seat. One game a week. ESPN gets Monday Night Football. It's a $2.6 billion a year TV rights fee. The NBA just left Turner to go to NBC and Amazon for big-time money. And so half of that goes to the players. And so now, marginal, average, far from superstar, far from all-star, even like marginal starters are making $20 million a year.
Isn't a big part of it, too, the fact that the rosters are just so small in the NBA and each player gets so much more? Like, you know, what do we have, 10, 12-man roster in the NFL? It's like 50-some guys. Isn't that a big part of it, too?
Well, I mean, it's 15-man rosters, and the NFL is 53, but the NFL salary cap has gone up $100 million in the last 6 years. So, yeah, the roster sizes are large, but, like, you look at, like, what this really shows you is just how small potatoes the NHL has just remained for the last 5 years.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I get a kick out of people always saying, well, Gary, and Brian Burke says, and I love Brian Burke, but he says all the time, our growth, our success, it's all because of Gary. He's just so smart. And I think, I don't know. I think
because his son works for Gary.
Well, I think the NHL was more comparable to the NBA when he took over, but I'm getting totally off the rails. I wanted...
This to me basically sums up the NHL, and I don't know why we went down this rabbit hole, but we have.
So I blame it on Don.
Brady Tkachuk is in the middle of a 7-year, $57.5 million contract. So what is that? An AAV of just over $8 million per year.
Guy.
Right. Where no one's having a tag sale for, Brady Tkachuk. His brother is in the middle of an 8-year, $76 million contract, so that's $9.5 million a year. Now, why do I bring this up? Because that's what these guys are making in 2026. 9.5 and 8.2. You know what their dad made in 2001?
Yeah.
$11 million.
Really?
Wow.
So
that's nuts.
That is crazy. I didn't know that Keith Tkachuk made that kind of money. I knew he was a good player. He was a star player.
That is a stunning piece of news.
I didn't know that, Arash. That's interesting.
Crazy.
25 years ago.
I was waiting for like $750 or something.
Like 20
says
and $11 million 25 years ago is probably the equivalent of, I don't know, between 18 and 20 million today.
Yeah,
so yeah,
for sure.
Right.
That's crazy, Arash. That's crazy.
That's interesting.
So, and in the comparison is that in 2001, I just Googled this. I don't know this off the top of my head. The highest paid player in the NFL was Drew Bledsoe at $22 million, and now guys are making $60 million. So the starting quarterback top-end salary has effectively tripled, and the NHL top-end salary has reduced.
That is really interesting. I think all the bums are overpaid, but that is interesting just to show the comparison how much the NHL has grown, the NFL has grown and the NBA has grown and the NHL has not. I wanted to talk a bit about the Blue Jays. 5 straight losses now. See if they can turn it around tonight, but a lot is going wrong, and namely they can't keep anyone healthy. How concerning is forearm tendonitis, I think they're calling it, for Max Scherzer, who lasted just a couple of innings last night?
Well, John Schneider came out today and said the expectation, the belief, the hope, whatever you want to call it, is that Scherzer is going to make his next start. And that may very well be the case. The question will be for how long. Now, Scherzer said the same thing last night after the game. Look, there's 2 things with pitchers you never want to hear. One is elbow, and 2 is forearm. And especially when you turn 42 years of age this season, as Max Scherzer will.
Yep.
And it's not just the age, it's how many miles he's logged along the way. The fact that he only threw 36 pitches last night is very concerning. So he may be back, he may be in the mix, etc. But at a time where there are 4 other starting pitchers in the rotation on the injured list, the name of the game here for anybody getting the ball to start a game is to eat innings. And if you have concern of whether or not your starter can do that, can work, legitimately get you 18 outs, even 15 outs, go 5 innings. These are real reasons for concern. Look, it's first week April, second week April, whatever. There's 150 games to go. I'm not really concerned about the standing. I'm just looking around. I'm like, okay, so they don't have a catcher. They now have 5 starters on the injured list. They just went and signed Patrick Corbin off the couch, who had one outing, no spring training other than whatever he was doing on his own, and now they're calling him up to go this week out of total necessity.
Well, they're going to have a good pitching staff. I think we can say they're going to have a good pitching staff when healthy. The issue is their pop gun offense. And a couple of weeks ago when I was on this show, I believe with you, Arash, with Barney, I said I think it's going to be more of a struggle for the Blue Jays this year than most people realize. And the reason I said that was offense. If you take a look at, for example, you go to Luke's, Clement, Barger, they don't have really a real track record as Major League Baseball hitters. They hit good in the playoffs last year, didn't do too bad, but they don't really have, a track record of being a hitter in Major League Baseball. You got a guy like Straw, he's not much of a hitter. Okamoto at third, we don't know whether, he's going to adjust well yet to Major League pitching. You're hoping that George Springer has another rebound year like he did last year after a couple of not so great years. They made a lot of assumptions, did they not, Arash, on their hitting once they lost Bo Bichette?
Yeah, and I think they knew, Don, that they were going to lose. I don't want to say lose Bichette. I think they knew Bo's time in Toronto was done. Bo had no interest in staying. They had no interest in keeping him. So it was an awkward dance the whole way. And their belief all along was that they were going to be okay in the middle of the infield with Andres Jimenez and Ernie Clement. They believed bringing Okamoto over from Japan as a corner infielder was going to help, and obviously Guerrero. They had to know that George Springer is just going to be a constant question mark from a health standpoint throughout the year, not a production standpoint. So, you're asking a lot of guys without a sizable track record beyond a year or so.
Exactly. Right.
Now, I look at it, and to me, and I think, I don't know if Brendan, if it was with you or if it was with Barney last week, to me, there was one position and one player that they could not afford to lose. And that was Alejandro Kirk. Because there's a difference between being an everyday catcher and a backup catcher on the roster. Tyler Heineman is not a starting catcher in the big leagues. Tyler Heineman's a guy who can, in spots, give you a day, maybe two, when Kirk needs a breather and a blow. And now for this to have unfolded the way it did, first on Friday, Heineman just throwing the game away after he had to come in for Kirk. And then on Saturday for him to airmail the ball over Ernie Clement's head. Those two are bad enough as is. But then my former colleague, my friend Ben Nicholson-Smith, walks into the visitors' clubhouse on the south side of Chicago and reports that Tyler Heineman's crying in the locker room.
Oh,
he's in tears.
Lord.
There's no crying in baseball.
I mean, if there's any rule that we all know is exactly that, Brendan. There's no crying in baseball.
I don't know. It just means that he cares. Come on.
No. Not 10 games into the season. Kevin Gausman was in tears after Game 7 of the World Series last year.
That we got. Yeah.
Okay, you walk in, you're a teammate, you're like, oh man, we just lost our starting catcher, and you walk in and you see a dude who who made a couple of errors in tears, you're like, that's the guy we're going to roll with for the next 40 games?
Do they need to go out and get somebody, do you think?
They won't. Like, there's two issues here. The first is there are two positions in sports where the demand is so high and supply is so low. One is quarterback, and the other is legitimate catcher, which is why guys like Buster Posey got the bag, which is why a guy like Russell Martin more than 10 years ago got $80 million. So that's one part of it. The other is the Blue Jays as a front office. I remember having this conversation in the dugout in Kansas City with Ross Atkins. I'm like, the supply-demand thing. He's like, I don't believe and buy that. They don't value the catcher position as much as they should, especially now when when you have 5 guys on the injured list and it's a bunch of pitchers on the mound that nobody's ever heard of. You need somebody to manage that, and they don't value it. So it's not a good combination, and I think it's really going to hurt them over the next few weeks.
Well, it's bad when the Dodgers throw a position player onto the mound at the end of last night's game.
Well, I was going to say, usually in the first 60 days, you're kind of stuck with what you have, aren't you? I mean, we talked about a lot of GMs feel that way, like John Sherholtz, when he was a GM in Atlanta, he kind of had an unwritten rule that he wouldn't make any deals in the first 60 days, and there are other teams that probably feel the same way. They're kind of just stuck with what they have, aren't they, in all likelihood, at least for the first while?
For the first while. And who knows how this is all going to play out. Like, it's April 7th. There's lots of baseball to go. But at what point are you going to look at it and say, okay, we got to do something here? Because they're saying 6 weeks for Kirk, who's having surgery, a screw put into the thumb, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, 6 weeks until what level will he be back at that point?
Yeah,
yeah.
Well, I was just going to say they look deflated, like in the little bits and pieces that I've seen. Admittedly, I've not watched every inning of Blue Jay baseball, but they're just making little errors, kind of like what we saw in Chicago, especially that one where he threw the ball away. We don't know if that killed them in the game, but it kind of killed them. Like, it would have been a one-run game, and they would have had a fighting chance, and it didn't work out that for them. We'll see what happens in the week ahead. It'll be really interesting to see if they can get out of this funk. Things were feeling pretty good after that opening weekend sweep of the Athletics. It was the A's, but it was still a sweep. We talked a little bit earlier with Brian Munz about the Humboldt Bronco tragedy. We're almost a decade later now. We're just past the 8th anniversary. Why, in your mind, Arash, does it still resonate so much with Canadians, not just here in Saskatchewan, but in Eastern Canada and coast to coast?
Well, and I think even anywhere, North America, is because everybody's been on that bus.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're an athlete or not. If you played in the band, you probably went on a trip somewhere. If you went on a school trip, you've been on the bus. And then obviously, no matter the sport, if you played one, you were on that bus. Everybody can relate with being on that bus. And how many bus trips have we all been on? How many Friday afternoons, if you're an athlete, Friday evenings, were you riding the bus with the coaches and a trainer and your teammates, etc.? It is the most personal, relatable thing. These weren't grown-ups. These weren't professionals. These were adolescents that it doesn't matter today if you're, in middle school, high school, if you're 30 years removed from high school. We've just all been on that bus. And so when something like that happens, it resonates. Yeah, it reverberates. Yeah, it makes you remember those times and think of those times. And then you start thinking about the families and everything that's happened. I think it's personal because we've all been there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I hadn't really thought of it that way. I remember when it happened, it really shook me. And my wife said, I think the reason it shook you, it's not because you knew, well, it's partly because you knew some of these people. It's because they're who you used to be. Because I used to be a broadcaster who'd ride around on the bus. But it's not just those of us who worked in the SJHL. Coast to coast, like you said, Arash, whether you've played hockey or not, we've all been on that bus. And I remember one line that stood out to me the week it happened from Todd McClellan, who was about 3 NHL teams ago on his coaching journey, made the comment that on the bus is usually where you feel the safest. And so I think that's what really hit all of us.
True.
And it's a story that doesn't go away, and it won't go away as it continues to evolve, as we see people having to soldier on. Arash, thanks for this, and we'll talk to you again later this week.
Okay. Thanks, fellas.
Thanks,
Okay.
Arash.
That is Arash Madani joining us
Always good. He's always good.
Joining us on the Western Pizza Hotline. Perfect pizza, generous amount of toppings, and all the Greek favorites you love. I was going to say that with Arash and his report for Smart Investing Solutions, be smart with your money. Call Brian Golly at Smart Investing Solutions, 546-2533. Sometimes we think of him as just the Toronto guy, but I actually think a lot of his best stuff is non-Toronto stuff, like when he's doing Vanier Cup sideline reporting or UTEC Bowl, or even talking about what happened 8 years ago in Saskatchewan.
You know, if you listen to Arash, he does such a good job of painting a picture about whatever the topic is that you're discussing. He paints the picture as well as anybody I've ever heard, Brendan.
That was interesting what he said about the Kachucks, about Keith getting more than I didn't know that, because Keith was always kind of a stiff, hey?
Well,
like,
I mean the cap has gone up, to be fair.
Yeah, things were way out of whack back then, where teams were losing money like crazy.
Right. There was no cap and whatnot.
There was no control. It was the wild, wild west.
And as a Canucks fan, you should still be angry that the New York Rangers bought that Stanley Cup when they beat the Canucks
in '94. That's true. That's 100% true.
And I'm glad that's not happening. And now we have a much better NHL with a parity, with the floor and ceiling and the cap is much better. I mean, has there been better playoff races, Brendan, ever than there is right now in the NHL?
I don't think so. And I know we got a break here, but I was going to say, as far as the Kachucks, one thing that always kind of annoyed me about John Paddock was they traded Teemu Selanne, right? And they kept Keith Tkachuk. And years later, Ottawa and Anaheim met in the 2007 finals. And so somebody decides they're going to do a story on this because a lot of the principals are there, like Randy Carlisle's coaching the Ducks. And he said, I supported the trade. And then he laughed. He said, that was a dumb trade and you shouldn't have done that, right? And Chad Kilger said he remembered being in the dressing room and thinking, okay, what else are we getting in return? Keep going. No, sorry, it wasn't Chad Kilger, but I think it was Ed Olczyk said, we're in the dressing room, we're waiting. Okay, what else? What else? And that was it, what they were getting. And then John Paddock was saying, well, at the time we decided that we had one star we could keep. It was going to be Keith Tkachuk or Teemu Selanne, and we thought Tkachuk was the guy. And I'm like, stop trying to defend it. Just say, we made an error. We made a mistake, and let's just move on. No one bats 1,000, and did he.
I don't know. You're going to have to cut me off here, but Teemu Selanne at the Olympics talked about Finnish hockey and the passion he had for his country. And Finland does such a great job in hockey for 5 million people.
Yeah,
that's all
crazy,
Finland has is 5 million people, and they're one of the hockey powerhouses in the world. And when you listen to Selanne talk about Finnish hockey the way that he did, you realize why they are so good for such a small country.
And they stand up to the bullies next door, the Russians. I think we could all learn a thing or two from our friends.
Absolutely.
Our Finnish friends.
Absolutely.
Time to break. More of The Cage coming up. You are listening on 620 CKRM. Saskatoon Blades forward Rowan Calvert had the game winner in Game 7 of the Blades' first ever, as you heard earlier on the program, road victory in a Game 7. Les Lazaruk said they were 0-9-2 in previous Game 7, still trying to figure out how you can have a tie in a Game 7, but apparently it used to happen. Going back to the 1960s, and they win the series. And lately, the Blades have had a lot of heartache in Game 7s. I think he said they've lost the last 3 in a row that they've played in. And 2 years ago, that great epic showdown in the Eastern Conference Final when they lost to the Moose Jaw Warriors in that 7th game, which probably hurt even more when the Warriors went on to steamroll the Portland Winterhawks in the finals, because you just have to know the Blades would have done the same thing. And one thing I never did ask Les about, and I wish I had, he's probably forever curious about how the Blades would have done had they got far enough to that Memorial Cup to see how they would have done in Saginaw, Michigan that year. I think it was in Saginaw. You wanted to add one too?
I figured I'd give a couple nods to the NCAA. Women's, of course, championship happened this weekend. UCLA defeating South Carolina, and then last night Michigan took out UConn. So,
do you do a bracket for the women's too?
I normally participate. I missed it this year, just got busy when it was starting and missed putting in brackets, but I like to do it just because, then it's another bracket in there and maybe it's the right one.
Yeah, my bracket's so bad that I wish I did more brackets, and I should just do that too. So yeah. I forgot to do it this year as well.
I remember the biggest group of friends I did one with was back in 2016, and that was the year Michigan State lost in the first round or second round. And so I think all of us were out after the second round. I was like, well, that was fun while it lasted.
I think the key is to take somebody who nobody else is taking, or at least one team. You got to pick one major upset, and that's your only shot, because if you go with the same team everybody else is going with, you're just going to be riding with them to the end. There's going to be the odd upset, and if that upset happens, you got it made in the shade because you're getting points that nobody else is.
Exactly.
Clutch Performer is for Keln Solar. They can help with your livestock operations, but now book your solar quotes for your home, farm, or cabin. Save money with a local company, Keln Solar in Lumsden. Coming up in hour 3 of the Sports Cage, we are going to talk with Glen Suitor, press coverage, and he wanted to talk about the Toronto Argonauts thing that I brought up last week. And it sounds like Arash is ready to give up on the CFL in Toronto. And of course, listen, Suits is pro CFL and is always going to be that way, and he should be that way. And I'm that way too. I think the whole point of why I bring up the conversation is that teams or organizations should never just sit there and say, this is a money loser. At least we're stable. We have corporate ownership, and we're just going to tick along because we've got somebody willing to write the checks. That only works for a while, and that doesn't actually grow the product or make things better. And that's why I think even though they have great ownership, and I will call them great ownership in Rogers, that's essentially who owns the Argos now because they have majority control of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, they shouldn't just be happy with that. Because there are rules in the CFL Constitution that I assume Rogers would follow, that if they ever decide they're just done funding this, they can give notice. It's like a year or 18 months notice. And then at the end of the final season that they're operating it, they can deposit, I think it's like $5 million or whatever it is, and say, here you go, we're done. It's kind of like an exit tax. We've seen that happen before. We saw that with the Montreal Alouettes in the 1980s. It happened when corporate ownership decided to leave the Toronto Argonauts in the 1990s and hand it off to this New York guy named Sherwood Schwartz. And things really went downhill once he got his paws on the organization. So I don't think that any organization should ever just be happy with being what they are, particularly when you see how the Toronto Argonauts don't resonate in the city of Toronto. And that's why I wanted to have that conversation about a better model for the Argos. You look like you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I saw a take yesterday on social media from a fairly prominent Maple Leafs fan whose name is escaping me now. He went viral last year or the year before during their playoffs for just absolutely losing it whenever something bad was happening, which was often. But he was talking about how, like, Rogers, like you said, is effectively the majority owner in Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. But the problem is, like, I forget the name of the president or whatever who is overseeing most of the sports teams is like a very large Blue Jays fan. And so he's focusing all his eggs into the Blue Jays and trying to do very well with them. And then the Argos, the Raptors, FC, the Leafs are all falling to the wayside because of it. That was just an analogy that I heard from somebody who is an avid Leafs fan, so probably has a lot more he pays a lot more attention to that market than I would.
Could be reality, it could be perception, but perception becomes reality. Mm-hmm. And it could be a situation where maybe because Rogers has had the Blue Jays for so long, you see Edwards speaking when they win the championship. I don't know that he cares as much about the other stuff as he does with the Blue Jays. And Keith Pelly's overseeing everything with the Maple Leafs, the Raptors, and the Argos. And Keith Pelly used to love the CFL. I suspect he still is a CFL fan. But what has he ever won? Mm-hmm. I don't know that he's ever won anything. He was part of the Argos around the time they were good in the mid-2000s. And sometimes those corporate Toronto people don't know everything either. And they don't always have the solutions. But all it takes is for somebody at Rogers to decide they don't want to fund this anymore. And once that day comes, the CFL and the Toronto Argonauts are in big trouble if they don't come up with a better plan. That's all I'm saying when I make the comment that they should look for, and if the Argos aren't going to do it, the CFL should look for it. The CFL should be the one saying, we're not happy with 15,000 people a game at every Argo match at BMO Field. The fact that they play in a facility that is not for them has been a problem for the Toronto Argonauts for 50 years. We're talking about how the Blue Jays are doing 77-cent hot dogs. I think it's tonight because they've been around for 50 years. When you play in a venue that is not for you, it causes a lot of small issues. Mm-hmm. It's issues with parking. It's issues with tailgating. It's issues with promotions. When you have limited access to the facility, it's limited as far as boxes you can sell. It's limited as far as seating. It's limited as far as visuals for how you construct the facility. It's issues as far as how you practice. The list goes on. And the Argos have not had a facility for them for 50 years, and it's really been the last 50 years that their popularity has dropped. Now, I'm not saying that these wackadoo ideas of going out to a municipality are going to solve everything, but it's an idea. It's something, and something is better than what they seem to be coming up with, which is we're just going to keep being what we've always been. And I don't know that a lot of those corporate Toronto people have a lot of belief in the CFL. I'm not sure that Keith Pelly has a lot of belief in the CFL. I think it's more of just, this is what they are, so we're going to go partner with the Buffalo Bills. That's not a solution. That doesn't do anything. I don't think that's done anything for the Argos since they came out with that promotion. They took a lot of flack for it. They went through with it. You haven't heard boo about it since, and you haven't heard about it boosting interest in the Argos in that town either.
One of the wildest things to me that's a thing. And the Bills have held up their end of the bargain a little bit because they've been like, hey, the Blue Jays are in the playoffs, go Blue Jays. And then all the Buffalo people are like, there's a New York team still in the playoffs. Why are you saying go Blue Jays? Because this was when they were about to face the Yankees.
Yeah, it's probably really divided allegiances, hey, in Buffalo. Yeah. I know there's a lot of Blue Jay fans. Like, I've been to Bills games, you'd see a lot of Blue Jay caps in the stands, but I suspect there's a lot of people who just grew up cheering for the Yankees, and like you said, sometimes that border is a lot bigger divider than you would think, although I feel like Buffalo's a lot more like Canada than the United States. But
yeah, again, it's a weird line, because like you said, there's going to be a lot of fans that cross over, but then there's going to be just as many that are like, no, this is my team, and no agreement you make or whatever is going to change that. So,
right, you're not going to tell us who we're going to root for just because you tell us that you're partnering with them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that reminds me, I think it was a month or so after that agreement came out, somebody posted in Toronto, just taped it up on a lamppost or whatever, and it's like, dear Maple Leafs fans, we appreciate your fandom, but we can't take all of this bad luck that you're bringing on the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, why do we want Buffalo's karma to come in? Just be your own thing. Sprinkle of the day for Sports Select. You want to do it now?
Sure.
Okay. Getting in on more of the sports action you want is as easy as playing at sportsselect.com. Simply make your picks online, generate your QR code, and lock in your bet at your local lotto spot retailer. Every bet is 100% legal with the chance of winning cash in hand. Sports Select, when you're ready to play, bet on the original. Must be 18 plus to play. Play responsibly. And again, all of the money stays here in Saskatchewan. I thought I'd stick with what we know. I think we're batting 1,000 so far, you and I, in the
over-under
sprinkles that we've been doing. And I'm going to stick over-under in hockey. And I thought that the one that jumped out at me tonight would be the Tampa Bay Lightning at Ottawa Senators. And that's a game that's going to be getting underway shortly. There we go. You found it. So the over-under is 6. I don't know squat about these two teams. I just know that Ottawa's scraping tooth and nail to try and get in the playoffs. We heard from Brian Munz earlier that the issue with the Winnipeg Jets getting in is there's just too many teams bunched up, and that just creates way too many problems. So he doesn't like their chances of getting in, and for that reason, I don't like the Senators' chances of getting in. But it has created a buzz. Mm-hmm. I like that you just clicked on the over. You could see where I was going with that. I've been taking the over every time.
Yeah, I knew where we were going with this. So.
Over-under is 6, and we're going to take the over and see what happens. We're 3 for 3 so far, following this little strategy that we've copied from other bettors that we've talked to who know more than I do at this. I have faith that the Ottawa Senators and Tampa Bay Lightning will combine for more than 6 goals in their game tonight in Ottawa. Very crucial game for the Ottawa Senators if they're going to keep their playoff hopes alive. And that is your sprinkle of the day for Sports Select. Again, getting in on more of the sports action you want is as easy as playing at sportsselect.com. Simply make your picks online, generate your QR code, and lock in your bet at your local lotto spot retailer. Every bet is 100% legal with a chance of winning cash in hand. Sports Select, when you're ready to play, bet on the original. Must be 18 plus to play. Play responsibly. Still kind of worried about the Blue Jays. We'll talk about that next when we come back. You are watching and listening to the Sports Cage on 620 CKRM. $50 gift card on the line to PumpJacks Cathedral. And I thought I'd go a little bit away from Regina for this one. The Saskatoon Blades and the Prince Albert Raiders are meeting in the second round of the postseason, and I don't know who's cheering for who or if people around Regina even care who win this series, but I suspect a lot of us will be cheering for whoever wins the series once they get to the next round, likely against the Medicine Hat Tigers, maybe the Calgary Hitmen. The trivia question today: when was the last time the Saskatoon Blades and Prince Albert Raiders met in the postseason? Simple as that. In town, 306-936-6262, or call us out of town, 1-866-767-0620. First correct answer wins the $50 gift card for PumpJacks. When was the last time the Blades and the Raiders met in the postseason? We'll take your calls now. And while we take those calls, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Blue Jays, where there's all this worry about their situation because they've been struggling. And it's not, I don't even know that it's that they don't have the manpower. It just seems like mentally they're deflated. Like Heineman throwing the ball away in Chicago, getting swept by a team that's not supposed to be any good. First of all, they lost 2 out of 3 against a team that wasn't supposed to be good, the Colorado Rockies. Then they get swept by another team that's not supposed to be very good, the White Sox. I keep saying not supposed to be because we're so early in the season, and it's hard to really figure out who's good, who's not good. But on paper, up until this Dodgers series, the Blue Jays schedule looked pretty weak. 3 against the Athletics, 3 against the Rockies, 4 against the White Sox. And for them to be under 500 is probably unacceptable to most coming into the series. And now they've been getting blown up by the Dodgers. We'll see how they do tonight, but early returns on this Blue Jay season aren't looking good. And usually, I'm also a big believer that you don't overreact and make a trade if things aren't going your way in April or May. But I wonder if maybe this is the exception to the rule for the Toronto Blue Jays, because it's an important year for them. They have a big payroll, and if they fall far enough behind, it could get ugly in a real hurry. I also wonder if they made such a big offer to, what's his name, Kyle Tucker, the infielder who they lost to the Dodgers in free agency. I think they offered him 10 years, $350 million, which even by today's standards, still a lot of money in Major League Baseball. And the Dodgers came back and said, we'll give you 4 years at $60 million per. So they went back to the Blue Jays, and the Blue Jays said, no, we're not going any higher than we have. So they didn't sign Bichette. They didn't sign Tucker. That tells me that they've got room if they need to eat a bad salary or a bad contract or something to try and beef up their lineup just a little. So I don't know that they have the luxury that they can just sit around for the month of April or carry into May without making a move. So I think ultimately the Blue Jays have to make a move, probably a little bit sooner if things keep going off the rails. I think the next week to 10 days will be the telltale for how that all works out. We'll step aside and take a quick timeout and come back with more of the Sports Cage on 620 CKRM. No WHL playoffs tonight as they get set for round 2, but in the SJHL, they're already going great guns in the league semifinals. You have the Yorkton Terriers visiting the Battleford Stars, Game 3, 7:30 puck drop, pregame show with Benny Walchuk on GX94 at 7:15. That series is tied up at 1. Over in the other semifinal, the Weyburn Red Wings are home to the Flin Flon Bombers. That best of 7 also tied up at 1. Should be really good. Final 4 in the SJ as we get to Game 3s of the semifinals. Canadian Masters Curling Championships are happening. They will continue through April 11th in Grand Prairie, Alberta. Saskatchewan is represented by Weyburn's Jim Nicolishin and Yorkton's Kathy Inglis. On the schedule tonight, Nicolishin is taking on Alberta. That's an 8 o'clock draw, and Inglis is also taking on Alberta. So both of them playing Alberta at 8 o'clock Saskatchewan time tonight. NHL regular season games involving Canadian teams. The Montreal Canadiens home to the Florida Panthers. I know the professor, Don Hewitt, will be tuned into that. The Calgary Flames on the road to play the Dallas Stars. The Edmonton Oilers are in Salt Lake City to play the Utah Mammoth. The Canucks are home to the Vegas Golden Knights. And, of course, the Blue Jays trying to get it together against the LA Dodgers. Opening pitch just after 5 o'clock this afternoon. SportsCage.com poll: should referees call games differently in the playoffs and overtime? Go to SportsCage.com for the poll question. That is your sports ticker for Extreme Hockey and Sport. Whatever your spring sport is, Extreme Hockey has you covered. And
we got a caller for trivia now.
Okay, so we will bring in our caller for trivia. Who do we have on the line?
Hey there, boys.
Who do we have and where are you calling from?
I'm here.
It was Josh and Weyburn.
Josh and Weyburn calling. Okay, Josh, the trivia for $50 gift card to PumpJacks Saloon in Cathedral. When was the last time the Saskatoon Blades and Prince Albert Raiders met in the postseason?
Ooh, let's go 2023.
No! Thanks for calling. Thanks for playing. He gave it a good try.
He did. I'll get him his free lunch here, but because if you don't know, you get a free lunch for calling in.
There you go.
You do want to win the gift card, so it'll be $100 next week.
Okay, very good. We're going to double it up. Very good. I love it. And that is the trivia for PumpJacks Saloon. Coming up in hour 3. We will check in with Glen Suitor, talk about a whole bunch of things on press coverage related to the Canadian Football League, as we do every week. I got his thoughts on the ratio last week, where we kicked it around about whether or not they should change the ratio. Instead of having 7 Canadian starters, should we have 4 Canadian starters on both sides of the football? I don't know that we need to go that extreme, but I do think that the league has a bit of a problem where teams are loading up all of their Canadians on the offensive side. If there was a team that bucked that trend late last year, it was the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who used 4 American offensive linemen, and it helped them in the playoffs. They won the West Final, then they won the Grey Cup. It'll be curious to see if the Riders continue to go that route this year, or if other teams try to follow suit as well. This is a copycat league, this CFL, as all of the leagues are, and maybe that'll solve the problem right there. I think that would be a more ideal solution than rather than having to adjust the player ratio where you have to mandate how many players on offense and how many players on defense. I just think that we need to do a better job of developing a variety of Canadian players, because too many teams have already made up their minds that they are not going to develop Canadian defensive backs and sometimes Canadians at other positions. We've seen that at quarterback, and we just need to get away from that mentality altogether. So I think that if you were to have 4 Canadians starting for sure on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball, I think that would nip that in the butt, but hopefully it doesn't come to that. Ultimately, let's be real. The talent pool of Americans is much, much deeper than of the Canadian players, and I don't blame I don't blame American players for not liking the ratio or even hating the ratio because they're not from here. They don't understand why we have it to begin with, and it doesn't benefit them in any way. And sometimes the ratio does seem a little bit arcane, but at the end of the day, the ratio is going to be here. I support the ratio, and it is what it is. So we have to figure out how to live with it. And if we continue down this path where teams keep loading up their Americans on defense, it's going to continue to impact the quality of play on the football field as far as an entertainment factor, and that's why it's always been a concern of mine. Coming up next, we will have press coverage with Glen Suitor. You are listening to and watching the Sports Cage at sportscage.com. Follow us on social media at SportsCage is the handle, and exciting to see what happens in that next round between Prince Albert and Saskatoon. I was thinking, I feel like everybody's going to be cheering for either the Blades or the Raiders because Alberta's taken so much from us in the last 50 years. We just don't want them to have it. And hopefully one of those teams can carry the torch and get a little bit further in this Western Hockey League playoff chase. We'll be keeping an eye on what's happening at the Canadian Masters Curling Championships in Grand Prairie tonight. Both Saskatchewan teams, Weyburn's Jim Nicolishin and Yorkton's Kathy Inglis, playing against Alberta tonight at 8 o'clock. Don't forget to check out our sportscage.com poll. Should referees call games differently in the playoffs and overtime? Find that at sportscage.com. Let's get to Suits.
Time now for press coverage with CFL and Saskatchewan Rough Rider legend Glen Suitor on the Sports Cage. Brought to you by Freeze Tallman Lumber. Locally owned, family grown, rooted in our community for 70 years in Regina and Fort Capel.
So last week we had a big chat with Arash Madani on trying to sell the Toronto Argonauts, and I love Arash to death. I mean, he knows Toronto better than I'll ever know it, and he's lived there for a very long time. He made it way further than I ever did in the media world, and I mean, he scraped his way and clawed from writing cheesy press releases for the Ottawa Renegades to being a national reporter, and just so impressive. But boy, when you get talking CFL in Toronto with him, it's like he becomes this gloomy Gus real fast, like a lot of people are in Toronto. And I sometimes wonder, maybe he's just been in Toronto too long. And sometimes if you're Torontoed too much, maybe you just become that way. It seems to me that sometimes the mood around the CFL in Toronto, I hear it from some of the people who work in their organization, is that the Argonauts today, a money loser with 15,000 fans, are just what the Argonauts are and all they're ever going to be. And I think that is a terrible, terrible mindset for them to have, because we've seen examples where somebody will come in and write the checks and everybody says this is all fine. And then a day comes where they don't want to write the checks anymore and everybody is scrambling trying to figure out what to do next. I think the Argonauts, and maybe if they're not going to do it, the CFL needs to undertake a project to figure out, how do we make this better? What could be different? Do we need to have a different venue? Do we need to market it better? What needs to be different? I know you wanted to touch on that when we talked late last week, and now the floor is yours, sir.
Well, there's a lot there. And first of all, let me start by saying I actually was listening in to Arash today on the show and did a nice job of bringing in some stats and notes about the difference in salary caps and things in different leagues, the NBA compared to the NHL and things like that. So Arash does a nice job, and I'm not jumping on to contradict his thoughts because in our age group, in our circle, and I say that as far as media, sort of from the age of 40 to 60, 70, that is the feeling you're getting when you're in Toronto and it's sort of your surroundings. So you're sitting in the press box, you're talking about the Argos, and that's the messaging that's happening. But I'll bring a sort of a half full approach to this rather than a half empty one. And that is that, first of all, I think Rogers have been great owners. You mentioned that. And they're owners that, when they figure it out from a staff perspective, not the corporation, but, the guys in the trenches for the Argos, when they get that plan together. And by the way, Pinball Clemens, who is one of those guys, is going to be up the dog's breakfast at the end of the month. And so I'll get a chance to talk to him about it and what their plan is. But, I think in an overall big picture look at it, and again, being half full here, I'm seeing the model happen in Vancouver in real time. What is possible in Vancouver in real time? Back in 2019, before Amar Doman bought the franchise, the BC Lions, the average audience or the average, attendance was 17,000, just over 17,000. And since Amar bought it, which is in 21, with the approach, and I've sat down with Mr. Doman a few times, and a couple just one-on-one when we talked about big picture stuff. And his approach is all in a way to support amateur football in British Columbia, all the way through, all levels of football, men and women, flag and tackle, all of it, in any way that he can. And his big picture thought is, if we can continue to build the excitement around the game at the amateur levels, at the younger demographics from the age 8 to 18, and we start as an organization supporting that, not just financially, but every way we can, camps, all of it, the business of the BC Lions will take care of itself. And he has put together that he took over in 21, and since then the team now is averaging 27,000 per game. And I know some people will say, well, that average is skewed because in game one he brings in a big name artist and there's a concert, and that game brings in 50,000, so it skews the average. But I did some digging deeper than just the average, and found that for football fans, there's been a 30% growth in attendance in BC over the last 2 years. So the idea to bring in new fans with a concert is not to skew the attendance average. It's to bring in new fans that haven't seen a BC Lions game maybe ever, and watch one and get excited after the concert is over, and maybe come back and buy another ticket. So it's a long haul look at it. It's a 10-year program. Support and get behind amateur football, get kids excited about the game at all levels, and then also bring in an entertainment aspect around the game of football, and then let's do it over a long time. Every time that Mr. Doman is in front of a microphone, Brendan, he will say at some point in the interview, not being asked, but he'll fit it in somewhere where he says, I'm not going anywhere. This is going to be a business that my family and I will work on as long as we're here. And that brings great stability, and then a 10-year plan. I'm not sure, as great of the owners as Rogers has been out in Toronto, I'm not sure that's ever been the approach there. I think what the approach in Toronto has always been is, how do we talk the 25-year-old into coming to an Argos game? And unfortunately, we have lost that decade. We have lost that group of young ticket buyers, sports fans. And that's where Arash, I think, is correct. And that's the sort of the group that we're traveling with or talking to and seeing at games and different sports and things like that, is that age group. So again, the half full thing here, Brendan, for Toronto would be a 10-year plan, the support of amateur football. The Buffalo Bills thing, clearly we know why Buffalo's doing it with their new stadium and everything. But Toronto can still get something out of this. They really can. If the Bills and the Argos have there are 2 starting quarterbacks at a quarterback camp and there's 50 kids there, that slowly starts to build that increase in excitement. And maybe they go to Argos, maybe they go to Bills, maybe they go to both, but you start to do it. So establish what is the real issue? And here's the other thing about the 15,000 a game that they're having right now, or they're seeing right now. Toronto FC in Toronto is averaging about 21,000. That's a huge success story there, right? I mean, soccer is going to be big over the next 2 years, certainly big this year with the World Cup coming. And Toronto FC at 21,000 a game is a huge success story. Okay, so the Argos are 6,000 fans away from that number. And how many million people live in Toronto?
Oh, I don't know, like 8. Like, it's huge. It's I want to say it's number 3 North American market. I think behind behind New York, Los Angeles. I don't think anybody else is a bigger media market in North America. But carry on. Sorry.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, no, exactly, Brendan. So if you take the 18 or the 8 to 18 demographic and you break that down and you spend all your time focusing on marketing to them, getting them excited about the game of football in general, not making it about one or the other, but, because in the East and in Toronto, I don't think it works to say the CFL is better, come to see us. It just doesn't. It's a different mentality. It doesn't work there. So just forget about that. And let's just get kids excited about football, get them into BMO. BMO's a good little stadium. It really is. It's not bad at all. It's a great place to grow from. It's easy to get to in the downtown core. It's great views around there. Lots of restaurants and stuff. So it is a good spot and a good stadium. And, I think once you put all of that plan in and then play the long game of 10 years, which how many years has MLSE owned it now? Right?
10 years. 10 years. 10 years.
Yeah.
10 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So, not MLSE. Sorry, it was Larry Tannenbaum for a while, and then MLSE took it over a few years later. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, but I think the idea to come in and say, I'm going to talk a 25-year-old in Toronto into coming to an Argo game is crazy. That guy's already committed. He's gone. He's gone to Buffalo, and it's over there. But what you can do is get the 8 to 18 year, and they're going to bring their parents to start with. They're going to bug their parents until they go to a game. And I've used this many times, but it's the Disney model, right? Disney never throws has a TV ad that sells the parent. Disney just says, hey, come and see Buzz Lightyear. And then your kid comes up to you and sells you on Buzz Lightyear, and you end up spending $10,000 on Buzz Lightyear. So, it's a different angle to get those kids excited. I just think if you look at the Vancouver model, which is a big city with an NHL hockey team, and you look at the approach of Amar Doman, and you apply the same philosophy in Toronto, and in 10 years, if you can't make that work, then it's time to move the team.
Or look at other options. Like when you say move the team, I assume you mean somewhere else in the GTA. I feel like you need
exactly like Mississauga. Yeah,
sure.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, you can tell that I've been fascinated with this lately, and I'll just show you the book that I've been reading, Bouncing Back from National Joke to Grey Cup Champs. Paul Woods, I forgot his name for a second, wrote. So I've kind of been fascinated by the topic. I think largely it's not so much that the 83 Argos interest me that much, although they do. It takes you back to a time when the Argos were big business and the organization was not really geared toward football. And I think that Ralph Sazio taking over as team president, he was all about winning, but at the same time, he was cutting back on the marketing staff and basically said, winning will take care of everything. And he mocked the marketing people. And a lot of people believe that they're paying the price for it today. Doug Mitchell took over as the CFL commissioner, and under his tenure, they lost the big TV contract. And so I remember thinking that he must have been a bad commissioner because all these bad things happened. And I've read into it. And actually, no, I actually think he was a pretty good commissioner. I think he was more a victim of circumstances because he kept having to argue with Ralph Sazio why they needed to lift the blackout policy in Toronto, why that was bad for business. And Ralph Sazio, being a guy from another generation, another era, didn't understand it, couldn't wrap his mind around it. And I think that there's some real validity to the theory out there that it all started with Toronto losing a generation of kids watching games on TV with that blackout policy, and they've never really recovered. So I think that adds a bit of credence to your point, which is you need to get the kids loving this, not just interested. You need to get them loving this and hooked on it. I remember as a young CFL fan, I grew up in a household, an extended family on a farm. Nobody watched CFL. Nobody cared about it. It was me who got interested in it. So how do you draw those people in? Now, we've had the same conversation with Farhan Lalji, who lives in the same community that you do. And he seems to think that things are working in Vancouver and things are on the uptick. Here, from a distance, we don't really see it as much because we turn on the TV, we see BC Place, we see lots of empty seats, and we assume, like you said, the attendance is skewed because of that opening night concert. Not that anybody's criticizing BC Lions ownership for doing that, because they're injecting money, they're investing just like NFL owners do. So my question to you is, what is the tangible difference that you're seeing under Amar Doman's ownership now that we're 5 years in? What is the tangible, not the difference in his ownership, the difference in the result? What is different today from 5 years ago?
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's the respect and credibility. And again, the overall look at building and supporting amateur football in the province, growing the game itself, is the goal and objective, and then the business takes care of itself and it will slowly grow. And this idea that it's just because of the concert goes down the drain because it's been a 30% increase. But also I could go back to the mid 70s, mid 80s when Bob Ackles showed up in Vancouver. It was again a very different before he arrived, the BC Lions were in big trouble. Bob Ackles shows up. He comes from the Dallas Cowboys and his time in the NFL, and he's the water boy that's come up through the BC Lions system and then goes down to the NFL, has a great career down there, comes back, and is the GM, president of the BC Lions. And within a few years of him doing the exact same thing, he created a corporate group of people called the Water Boys. And I went to some of those meetings early in my career in television when we would sit around a corporate table it started with 10, it ended up being 50, and I don't know how many at the end, where they would talk about how the BC Lions can support British Columbia, the kids in British Columbia. What do you need from us? And it's interesting because yesterday, in a press conference, Chris Morris, the president of the Edmonton Elks, said a lot of the same things. He said, we can be profitable very quickly here, but we have to get the respect back of the corporate community and tell the community through our messaging that what can we do for you and for the kids and amateur football kids playing in this city, not what can the city do for the team. And it's an opposite approach, and it seems simple, but this is how it slips away. Bob Ackles turned it into 50,000 average. Now, I don't think our country is there anymore. I don't think really Canada is. We're going to see the football or even soccer or anything where there's 50,000 fans, unless it's a one-off like the World Cup or something. But it's not going to be, the Whitecaps are not going to see 50,000 in their lifetime. I mean, it's never going to happen. So I just think that's changed. The model has changed. We're looking at 30 is a great crowd. And Morris mentioned that 20,000 is break even for Edmonton, and it's probably very similar in a lot of cities. So that's an interesting number to get to anyway, which makes the Argos just 5,000 fans away from a break-even point. So again, that's a half full approach. And I do understand the attitude in Toronto and what it is and how people currently feel, but I think that's people in our circles. If you go beyond that and you dig into that other demographic and spend 10 years focused on it, Amar spent 5, and I'm seeing the difference in amateur football registration is through the roof. Flag is becoming bigger and bigger every day. Getting more involved with watching that because Nathan Rourke is doing it. And, when you add that Canadian quarterback who ends up being the MOP in a year, that helps. But here's one other one, Brendan, and I think it's the simplest and yet probably the most important, is that at some point, the entire CFL in our country has to decide exactly what the issues of attendance are. Are they because the game is broken, or are they something else that we can work on, as we just discussed? Because the narrative of the game is broken has been happening for the last 20 years. And that, to me, and I heard Nathan Rourke just today on social media say, I don't believe the game is broken. The game is exciting. So we have to get to a point where we just say the message from everyone involved with the game, coaches, players, the administration, the head office, all of it, that we have come to an agreement that the game is where we need it. That doesn't mean we turn down ideas. That doesn't mean rules committee doesn't look at tweaks. That doesn't mean we change little things here and there. But we have to stop messaging to people that the game is broken, because it's not. It's exciting. Go look at the Grey Cups for the last 10 years. I mean, come on. Look at the West Final. I've been doing work for my speaking engagement on the West Final. That was some kind of game, man. Like, come on.
Well, and the Grey Cups have trounced the Super Bowls the last 2 years, and which is exciting for me because that's how it was for a long time. But I was going to ask, because you live in Vancouver, and so I don't know. Like in Toronto, the suggestion has sometimes been made that if the stadium was closer to the fan base, and what I mean by that is the soccer teams, I think, draw better. I think they still draw better in Vancouver. I could be wrong for the Whitecaps compared to the Lions, but the TV numbers are way better. They do not outdraw the Lions. Okay, okay, they're lower, yeah. But the TV numbers are way better for the football. That maybe I know the suggestion has been made that maybe the Lions would draw better if they were just in a different location. And I know Amar said that he's heard that and he doesn't agree with it just because BC Place is such a good facility. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with them. It's an excellent facility, and the bottom bowl at that is 30,000, 33,000, something like that. So that's the goal, and that's a profitable situation. And that you make a good point though that I missed when looking at all the numbers here. The television numbers tell a different story. I mean, television numbers that I've been saying for 20 years now are, even with Argo games, are between 300,000 and 500,000 a game in our country nationally. And if you compare that to soccer, it's 10 times more. I mean, 10 times more the audience on television. I'm not saying that to take a shot at soccer, because they're still building and it's growing. But if you look at the Argo games on TV, there are 300 to 500,000 people out of Ontario watching the Argo games. So again, in a half full approach, if there's 300,000 that are interested to watch it on television, then how do we get those kids and those families out to the games? And that, again, has nothing to do messaging, not fake news, not making stuff up. I'm talking about positive messaging that highlights what makes our game great. And then be consistent over and over and over again at the right demographic, get those kids into the stadium and watch how they, when I became a fan of the BC Lions and football in general, I was a kid watching the Lions practice at it was a one-off thing at a high school in North Vancouver. And it was Harry Holt and Jerry Taggy and Leon Bright. And it was, guys are going to Google that and go, wow, that was a long time ago. But I watched these huge athletes running around and go, I want to play football. I want to play. And that's when I started watching Canadian football. And then I went to one game, ran on the field at BC Place Stadium and got Jim Young's chin strap. Jim Dirty 30 Young's chin strap.
Chose to leave the NFL for Canada.
Yes, which I still have somewhere back here in my crawl space. But, you know, my point is that those kids get pretty wide-eyed when they see that beautiful green field at Mosaic and they fill that stadium with kids. And those guys are fans forever. And as soon as they start buying tickets, they're bringing their girlfriends or whatever to the games. And you know, I think that's the patience and the long-term plan that is necessary in Toronto. And if it doesn't work after that, and we already have maybe grown to a franchise in Quebec City, a franchise in Halifax, then maybe it is time to take the Argos and put them in Mississauga or one of the, you know, suburbs in Ontario, because those that say the Argos, we can't have a CFL without a Toronto team. Well, did the NFL say we can't have the NFL without a LA team? Because for a long time,
definitely not.
And
it worked just fine. And look, listen, with the changes coming to the field size, I think that's going to fix the issues they had with the end zones at BMO Field, and that might not sound like such a big deal, but it makes it look a little less Bush League when you don't have to cut the end zone. So I think that'll be a good change. And my only issue with Arash was suggesting that OHL teams and the soccer team had as much prominence as the Argos. Well, when the Argos won the Grey Cup here in 2022, the audience numbers surged at 5.5 million in the fourth quarter. You're never going to see that for the soccer team or the OHL team or anybody else. Listen, we're out of time as always. Next time I'm on, we will carry on this conversation for 6 more sports cages at least, I'm sure.
Time for a half-full glass of wine.
I beat you on the old school hat, though.
Yeah,
you think you're old school? I had the old frequency here. Keep you guessing. That is press coverage with Glen Suitor joining us on the Western Pizza Hotline. Time to take a break. When we come back, we will hear from Les Lazaruk once again, who made the brilliant call in Game 7 of the first round playoff series for the Saskatoon Blades. But first, we will go ahead with the sports ticker. SJHL playoffs tonight. A couple of Game 3s happening. Both series, both semifinals tied at 1 game apiece. Best of 7s. The Yorkton Terriers on the road against the Battleford Stars. You can hear that Game 3 on GX94 with Benny Walchuk starting at 7:15. And the Weyburn Red Wings at home to the Flin Flon Bombers tonight. 7 o'clock puck drop at the old Coliseum there. Major League Baseball, the Blue Jays, we've been so gloomy about them, at least I've been today. They are in the bottom of the second, scoreless with the Dodgers, threatening with a man in scoring position, and Nathan Lucas at the plate. So who knows, maybe the Jays can turn it around in that one. SportsCage.com poll: should referees officiate games differently in the playoffs and in overtime? That is your sports ticker for Steelcraft Doors Regina, made in Western Canada for Western Canada. Coming up next, we will hear again from the great Les Lazaruk about his epic Game 7 overtime call for the Saskatoon Blades. You are listening to the Sports Cage and watching at sportscage.com.